Okay, let's dive right into an explainer today that validates a very common yet deeply unsettling feeling. Have you ever had someone say something to you that sounded incredibly kind, but your gut reaction was to immediately pull away? Well, today we're analyzing a fascinating psychological dynamic that explains exactly why that happens. We have to start with this seemingly beautiful phrase, as long as you're happy. On paper, that sounds like pure, unconditional love, doesn't it? It's supposed to be the ultimate selfless statement. But let's be real. When certain people say it, it often makes our skin crawl. It creates this heavy, suffocating atmosphere instead of a liberating one. The material we're looking at today breaks down the exact reason why this specific phrase triggers such a strong, uncomfortable physical reaction in so many of us. To unpack this mystery, we're going to peel back the layers of this dynamic step by step. We'll look at the mask of love, what benevolent sadism actually is, the absence of self, the sheer damage done to victims, whether or not they can be cured, and finally, how you can protect yourself.
All right, kicking things off with part 1, the mask of love, beautiful words versus ugly realities.
So, the core issue here is this massive, glaring gap between the beautiful things they say and the intense hostility they're hiding underneath. People who use phrases like this, they're often hiding their unconscious hatred or negative feelings behind a perfectly crafted facade. They use pure words to deceive not just you, but themselves. They present this surface level of extreme self-sacrifice, but underneath there is a swirling vortex of absolute control and an unspoken threat that basically says, I will never let you go.
And hey, the crucial takeaway here is that you are not crazy. That creepy feeling, it's highly accurate. Your body is literally physically reacting to the severe tension and hidden hostility this person is desperately trying to suppress. Even if their words are perfectly sweet, the unresolved inner conflict and the sheer effort of keeping those dark motives buried just leaks out as a heavy tension. You simply can't relax around them because on a primal level, you're sensing a threat.
Which brings us to part 2. What exactly is benevolent sadism? How is hostility disguised as care? Well, benevolent sadism is a pretty chilling term, mainly because it smashes together two things that absolutely should never mix. It's the desire to control someone like a slave, but entirely cloaked in the ultimate disguise of pure goodwill. These individuals don't rule with an iron fist or physical threats, right? They rule through guilt, obligation, and the illusion of extreme care. It's an incredibly manipulative form of psychological dominance, where the abuser convinces the world and the victim that they are an absolute saint. Psychoanalyst Eric Fromm had a terrifying but brilliant insight into this. He noted that a benevolent sadist, often a parent or romantic partner, actually does want you to do well. They want you to be wealthy, successful, and admired. But here is the massive catch. They only want that for you as long as you remain their property. The very second you try to achieve true freedom and independence, the moment you no longer need them, they will fiercely step in and do everything in their power to sabotage that independence.
Moving to part 3, the absence of self, or really the root of this whole obsession.
Why do they do this? Well, these individuals suffer from what's called an absence of self. That means they are entirely empty inside. They literally lack the internal mechanism to just make themselves happy or find meaning in their own lives. Because they cannot generate their own joy or stability, they are forced to cling to you. They use other people as property and as a sort of emotional energy source, just to fill their own void. Now, confronting that kind of inner emptiness would take a massive, painful amount of self-reflection. And to avoid that endless work, they substitute true human connection with what psychology calls neurotic effort. This is that obsessive, compulsive drive to overcare, overmanage, and oversacrifice. Think about the person who absolutely insists on doing all your chores, only to loudly sigh and play the martyr the entire time. It isn't driven by love for you. It's a completely selfish need to be applauded, to be seen as a good person, and to justify their own existence. They are effectively dumping their psychological baggage onto you so they don't have to deal with it themselves. So what does this do to a person? Let's look at part 4, the damage to victims and its devastating impact. Being trapped by this mask of love, it completely drains a victim's will to live. Imagine being utterly suffocated, but you aren't allowed to complain because, well, your captor is just trying to help. Victims often develop psychosomatic illnesses or severe addictions, even something like an obsession with work or studying, just as a subconscious strategy to escape that invisible cage. Because they've learned that love is actually a trap.
they often lose basic communication skills and develop this really profound fear of human connection and physical touch.
And this creates a really violent split in the victim's psyche. Consciously, they're desperately trying to feel gratitude for all those sacrifices the benevolent sadist has made. Society tells us we should be thankful, right? But unconsciously, there is an intense, burning hatred for the deceit, the hidden hostility, and the suffocating control. This brutal internal contradiction literally tears the victim apart from the inside. Ultimately, this constant exposure to hidden hostility and manipulation leaves the victim with what researchers call a frozen fear, because they were constantly subjected to unspoken threats and subtle insults wrapped up in fake kindness. A lifelong trauma gets etched right into their mind. And this frozen fear doesn't just vanish when they finally move out of the house. It can completely dominate their entire adult life, dictating how they handle friendships, romantic partners, and even their own self-worth. This leads us to a tough question in Part 5. Can they be cured? Let's face the grim reality. The reality here, according to renowned psychoanalyst Karen Horney, is that benevolent sadism is often the final stage of neurosis. She described it as a state where the heart is effectively dead. By the time a person reaches this level of deep systemic manipulation, they are so disconnected from their true self that their entire reality is built on a delusion. The prognosis honestly isn't good, and it often just leads to isolation, self-destruction, or pushing everyone they love away until they are entirely alone. The real kicker is understanding why it's so hard to cure them. They absolutely despise self-reflection. It's literally their greatest fear. If you try to expose their mask, you aren't going to get a grand epiphany, you're going to get intense, explosive rage, or they'll just immediately try to shut the conversation down. Real change only happens if the individual completely hits rock bottom and realizes that their neurotic sacrifices are totally useless and are only driving people away. Unless they actively choose to face their own emptiness, you just cannot fix them. Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, How to Protect Yourself and Reclaim Your Freedom. Your absolute first priority, especially if you sense their control could turn destructive, is to run. Distance yourself physically and emotionally. If you literally cannot leave right away, you have to disengage. Stop playing the slave role they've assigned to you. Do not give them the emotional reactions or the dependency they are so desperately craving. Finally, if and only if it is physically and emotionally safe to do so, you can try calmly pointing out the contradictions between their words and their actions. Asking something like, "Why do you say you want me to be happy but act so controlling when I make my own choices?" can sometimes break the illusion. But you have to be prepared for some intense pushback. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on today. Look closely at the relationships in your life where you feel that inexplicable, heavy tension. Are you sacrificing your own independence, your mental health, and your true happiness just to maintain someone else's mask of love? Remember, true love actually liberates you. It does not turn you into property. It might be time to trust that creepy feeling, step out of the illusion, and finally reclaim your freedom.